Let's talk about agentic coding, specifically with Cursor. If you aren't familiar with how Cursor is set up, generally there is a .cursor directory in your repository, which can have multiple folders, one of which is called rules, and another major one is called commands. Both rules, commands, and other different files that are fed into the agent are generally all Markdown based. Rules specifically are files that are giving instructions to the agent of how to follow best practices, essentially. If you notice that the agent is doing something that you don't like, you create a rule that is designed to guide the agent into doing the correct behavior. So for example, if you really want your agent to follow like test-driven development, for example, which is definitely a good idea if you're doing agentic coding, you might have a rule that specifically focuses on TDD essentials. Basically write a test first, then write the code to meet the test expectations, then run the test to ensure that it worked. There's also commands. So essentially these are prompts that you have designed to be reused. I have a bunch of these for my projects. Some of them are a little bit lazy dev, I'll admit. Like for example, I have a command for committing. And essentially what it does is it looks at all the files that have been worked on, and it intentionally creates topical commits. You could commit everything at once, and that's totally fine, but I like to have it separated based on like what type of file or what type of activity is actually being worked on in each one. So it kind of makes everything a little bit cleaner. Also, a lot of people tend to have commands that are workflow related. So for example, in my Markdown library, what I did was I created an I18N internationalization command, and essentially it automates the process of adding a new language to the library. Commands are actually incredibly flexible. You can do a lot more with Cursor or any agentic tool than you probably think you can. You can orchestrate system changes. It doesn't have to be just editing code, is what I'm trying to say. Moving on, there's also agents.md. This is kind of a newer concept that is starting to proliferate through all the tools. It's just another file that's in the root of your repo. And basically the idea is that whatever is in agents.md is supplied with every prompt. No matter what files you're touching with your chat session, it's included. So essentially the idea of agents.md is that it is repository specific instructions for the agent. What libraries are you using, what library versions are you using, etc. So in terms of like what's good to put in agents.md, my first recommendation would be to actually create migration guides. So I mentioned this in a previous video, but one big problem with every single LLM these days is that they have a knowledge cutoff. So they may be aware of the libraries that you're using, but they may not be aware of the newest versions of the libraries that you're using and what APIs have been deprecated, what's been added, etc. So what I like to do is I actually, for each important library that I work with, I create a very small migration guide and I add it to agents.md. And you can actually prompt an agent to do this for you. That's the other thing about this agentic workflow revolution that we're going through right now. Like, you don't have to do everything yourself. You just have to think of it and then have the agent do it for you. So for example, for a library like Tailwind, I think the knowledge cutoff for a lot of LLMs is around like Tailwind v3. So v4 came out a couple of years ago. There's a lot of changes, and what you do there is essentially you say, okay, I want you to look at v4 and beyond. I want you to make a list of all the new APIs, and I also want you to make a concise table of do and don't to be able to show like the new API usage. If you do this, it will dramatically improve the performance of your agentic workflow, and it will just avoid entire classes of like dumb errors that it would normally need to go back and futz with to get it working. Above all else, the number one thing I would say for any of these files is that they work as different pieces of a holistic system. So one thing that really confuses models is when rules contradict each other. So you can even use a model to look over all of them and tell you if anything contradicts, but just take a little bit of time and effort to make sure that ideally they don't overlap and that they don't contradict. And your overall, this is called the agentic harness, will work a lot better when you're trying to complete real work.